The greatest magic trick in human history has not been performed by Copperfield, Blaine, or Houdini. It does not happen on a stage in Las Vegas under the warm glow of theater lights. It happens 100 miles north, in the blinding white expanse of the Mojave Desert. Every magic trick, every casino heist, every successful counterintelligence operation relies on a single uncompromising fundamental principle: misdirection. The human brain, it's a predatory organ, wired to track movement and contrast. The magicians, they understand this biological flaw. They stand in the spotlight, hold up a brightly coloured silk handkerchief in the right hand. He snaps his wrist. He waves the silk in the air, creating a cascade of motion and colour that demands total neurological attention. And while your eyes are helplessly locked on that bright, shiny object, his left hand is submerged in the dark, quietly and efficiently slipping the gold watch off your wrist. You feel nothing. You see nothing. You only see the silk. In that unforgiving world of geopolitics, black budgets and bleeding-edge military technology, that bright-coloured handkerchief has a name. It is called Groom Lake. It is called Paradise Ranch. It is called Dreamland. It is Area 51. It is 5:30 in the morning. The neon glow of the Las Vegas Strip is a distant bleed against the dark sky. Out of a highly secured private terminal at Harry Reid International Airport, a very specific breed of commuter gathers in the fluorescent light. There are no tourists here, no luggage carousels, no floral shirts or slot machines. The terminal is filled with men and women in pleated khakis, sensible shoes and windbreakers. These are aerospace engineers, cryptographers, janitors, mechanics, and security personnel. They clutch their lukewarm coffees in styrofoam cups and speak in a hushed, unremarkable tone. They file out on the tarmac, board a fleet of unmarked Boeing 737s. The aircraft carries no corporate branding, no logos. There is only a single blood-red stripe running down the length of the white fuselage. As the jet engines spool to full thrust, the aircraft takes to the sky. They fly under a single highly classified call sign, Janet. Every single weekday morning, these unmarked jets carry thousands of Americans across the Nevada desert to a place that for decades, the United States government swore under oath did not exist. Area 51 is the most famous secret military base on the planet. It is the holy grail for aviation researchers, disenfranchised whistleblowers, and anyone desperate for the truth about the next generation of unacknowledged technology. It has been the subject of vicious congressional inquiries, massive Hollywood blockbusters, and the subject of many an Art Bell radio broadcast.
East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hi, Art. This is Brian.
The perimeter is a fortress of invisible architecture. It is lined with seismic motion sensors, all buried in the dirt. It is tracked by listening devices and thermal cameras. It is guarded by private military contractors, idling in white, unmarked trucks on the crest of a dusty hill. And if a civilian takes one step across that invisible line in the dust, the contractors will draw a weapon. They will end the threat. It looks like secrecy, and it feels like secrecy. But when one has spent a lifetime navigating the rigid, unforgiving architecture of secure, compartmentalized information, a hard rule emerges about asset protection. It is a rule written in blood and blown budgets. If everyone on the planet is staring directly at the front door, it means the asset has already been moved out the rear. To understand how a highly classified lethal facility transforms into a public decoy, the timeline must rewind. We must look at the men who guarded the perimeter long before the world knew where to look. We have to establish the baseline of what secrecy felt like before it mutated into a tourist trap. It is 1962. Mingus zips up a heavy standard-issue jacket against the biting, freezing wind of the Nevada night. He is not hunting for anomalies. He is a security professional, and he works the perimeter of Groom Lake during the absolute, paranoid height of the Cold War. He is guarding the black budget stealth programs that will keep the Soviet Union at bay. When he arrived, the base was not a sprawling complex. It was barely a collection of corrugated steel Quonset huts. Primitive dirt runways baking on a dry lake bed. Mingus stands on the edge of the Immigrant Valley and describes the base by its absolute crushing isolation. The silence of the Nevada desert back then is total. It is heavy. It presses against the eardrums. There are no tourists pulling up in rented sedans to take selfies. There are no highway markers and there are no gift shops. There is only the jagged looming peaks of the Papoose Mountains. The howling wind and the shoot-to-kill orders folded neatly in his front pocket. Back then, the secrecy worked because the isolation was physical. Geographic reality, it was undeniable. If an experimental prototype lost control, plummeted out of the night sky and shattered across the desert floor, Mingus and his team would not panic about the press. They would not worry about a hitchhiker with a smartphone stumbling across the wreckage. They executed the protocol. They dug into the earth and literally buried the glowing, twisted titanium wreck deep in the sand before the morning sun could crest the mountains. Mingus and his security team operated in a complete, breathless vacuum. They were ghosts, guarding ghosts. But as the decades grind on, Mingus watches the vacuum slowly collapse. He watches the isolation evaporate like water on hot asphalt. The perimeter transitions from desolate, terrifying military outpost into a strange, bizarre, globally recognized cultural phenomenon. The nearby town of Rachel leans in heavy, selling burgers and bumper stickers. The state of Nevada officially, almost mockingly, renames Route 375 the extraterrestrial highway. The perimeter sensors, the warning signs, and the Cammo Dudes in their white trucks become part of the law. It becomes a game of cat and mouse played out for YouTube views and amateur thrill seekers. Eventually, Mingus surrenders his badge. He retires and, in his later years, goes to work at the Atomic Testing Museum in the heart of Las Vegas. One day he sits down in a brightly lit room. He clips a microphone to his collar, and he begins, openly, giving on-camera interviews about his time working in the black. He talks about the security protocol, he talks about the isolation, and he talks about the raw reality of guarding the most secret place on Earth. This is the exact moment where the analytical mind must slam on the brakes, step back and interrogate the narrative. The Department of Defense, and specifically the intelligence agencies operating under the Special Access programs, do not simply relax their security protocols on humanity's most advanced aerospace technology. They do not get nostalgic. They do not let bygones be bygones. They do not forgive, and they do not forget. If a man who guarded the gates with lethal force is now permitted to sit in a public museum and tell war stories on the camera, and if the perimeter is allowed to become a circus of news crews, documentarians, and amateur interceptors, what did the Pentagon have to move out of those hangars to make that reality possible? You don't leave your crown jewels in a vault everyone on the planet knows how to find. You do not let the guards hand out tourist maps. Richard Mingus is the living proof that the vault was indeed compromised. And when a vault of that magnitude is compromised, the architects do not patch the cracks. They build a new vault. Now, we all know the base was compromised due to relentless public attention. But why keep the lights on? Why continue flying thousands of people on Janet planes every single day? Why maintain the perimeter with such an aggressive and highly visible, heavily armed force? The answer to that question is buried in a highly specific weaponized military doctrine known as MILDEC, military deception. And during the golden age of the Cold War, nobody understood the architecture of MILDEC better than one man, a man by the name of T.D. Barnes. Now, Barnes is not a guard. He is a CIA electronic warfare expert stationed at Area 51. He serves as the president of the Roadrunners Internationale, the elite, highly vetted shadow group of veterans, engineers and test pilots who actually took and flew black projects. Barnes is not just an aerospace engineer. He is a master illusionist operating on a massive geopolitical scale. His job fundamentally is perception management. His mission is to ensure that when Soviet reconnaissance satellites pass silently over the Nevada test site, that the opposition, The KGB analysts sitting in their dark, smoke-filled room in Moscow see exactly what the CIA want them to see. Barnes and his team don't rely on luck. They rely on mathematics, orbital mechanics, and espionage through highly classified intelligence streams. They possess exact orbital schedules of the Soviet Cosmos satellites. They know the precise second when the bird will be overhead. They know exactly the resolution of the cameras on board, and also the atmospheric distortion. The routine is clockwork. They roll real highly classified prototypes, the raw, unpainted titanium airframes of the A-12, or the angular radar-absorbing facets of the early stealth demonstrators, out of the hangars for engine testing. The heat ripples off the tarmac, but the moment the klaxon sounds, warning of an impending satellite pass, everything stops. The real assets are rushed frantically back into the dark hangars. The heavy doors slide shut. And this is where Barnes understands the psychology of the enemy. Hiding is passive. MILDEC requires active, aggressive deception. You can not just leave the runway of Area 51 empty. It makes the enemy suspicious. You have to give them something to look at. Barnes and the base engineers come up with an idea. It's ingenious. They build ghosts. They drag these heavy wooden shapes out onto the runway at the exact moment the Soviet satellites crest the horizon. They intentionally cast shadows that look like a massive, terrifying delta-wing bomber or a bizarre, asymmetric drone. They force Soviet intelligence to waste millions of rubles and years trying to research and counter a weapon system that was built with a hammer and nails. They weaponize the adversary's own surveillance network against them. They feed the beast exactly what they want it to eat. Now, extract the historical fact. Lift the exact same intelligence logic and apply it to the world today. If T.D. Barnes and the CIA could fool the entirety of the Soviet intelligence apparatus with plywood and heat lamps in 1965, what is the modern intelligence community using to fool the public right now? Area 51 is the modern-day plywood mock-up. It is the decoy left out on the runway. It is loud, it is highly visible, and it operates a fleet of commuter planes broadcasting their ADS-B transponder data for the whole world to track on their phones. It is practically screaming for attention. They want you to look at Groom Lake. They want you setting up campfires. They want you searching the rocky ridgelines of the Tikaboo Peaks with a spotting scope, hoping for a fleeting glimpse of an experimental drone. Because while your telescope is pointed at the lifeless dust in Nevada, the real bleeding-edge technology, the transmedium vehicles, the exotic propulsion drives, and the metamaterial research has been quietly packed up and shipped into the absolute dark. So if the desert is empty, where did the real assets go? To find the truth, you have to stop thinking like a patriot and start thinking like a thief. Imagine the greatest heist in history, except the thieves haven't stolen the gold. They stole the legal right to the truth. In the early days of the phenomenon, the government made a catastrophic realization. If a craft from somewhere else, or even a hyper-advanced human prototype, is recovered and stored on a military base like Area 51, it is considered a government asset. It is subject to the Freedom of Information Act. It is vulnerable to congressional oversight, pesky auditors, and whistleblower protections. It has a paper trail, but if you take that same craft, the shattered hull of metamaterial and exotic propulsion, and choose to move it off base under the cover of a transportation exercise, something magical happens. You don't put it on a C-17 and fly it to a runway the whole world is watching. You choose to load it in unmarked crates, put it on a flatbed under a tarp, drive it through the gates of a private corporation, and the moment that craft crosses the threshold of a company like Battelle Memorial Institute or Lockheed Skunk Works, it vanishes from public record. This is the ultimate bulletproof legal workaround. A United States congressman can demand to see a classified Pentagon file, but they cannot demand to see the proprietary research and development of a private defense contractor without a federal subpoena, and that will never ever be granted. The true heist was the privatization of the phenomenon. While the public were busy counting the Janet flights and arguing over Bob Lazar, The real source material, the crashed retrievals, the metamaterials, the biologicals, were all being handed off to private boardrooms in Palmdale and Columbus. They took the technology and they moved it behind a wall of NDAs, but not even the president himself could pierce. They didn't just hide the truth in the desert, they hid it in the law. They turned the greatest discovery in human history into a corporate trade secret. So while the Janet flights are buzzing over the Mojave, the most visceral evidence of the private handoff wasn't found by a whistleblower in a suit. It was actually found by a rancher in boots in 1994. A man by the name of Terry Sherman moved his family onto a patch of land in the Uintah Basin of Utah. He wanted to raise cattle. He wanted a quiet life, a quiet retirement. Instead, he found himself on the front line of a shadow war. Sherman didn't see the lights in the sky. He saw the logistics of the impossible. He described witnessing a craft the size of a motorhome, a massive matte black box hovering silently just feet above the desert floor. But it wasn't alone. Sherman watched as this craft was escorted, moving in an eerie synchronization across the ridgeline bordering the dugout-proving ground. Now, this wasn't a sighting. This was a transport operation. Locals in the basin have a name for this phenomenon. They call them the night trains. These are convoys of silent, unmarked flatbeds moving under the cover of total darkness. They are carrying tarpaulin-draped shapes that defy conventional gravity. When you track the telemetry of these convoys, a pattern starts to emerge. They don't head towards military airfields. They head towards the private gates of research annexes that don't appear on any civilian map. When Terry Sherman tried to follow these tracks, he was met by private security teams in tactical gear, men with no insignia, no names, and no hesitation. They didn't cite military law, they cited private property. This is the moment the heist becomes visible to the civilian eye. You realize that the truth has actually been moved behind a corporate fence, where your constitutional rights to inquiry simply die. Over time, Terry Sherman was forced off his land. In 1996, a billionaire by the name of Robert Bigelow. Now, Bigelow is a man with deep ties to the intelligence community and private aerospace industry. He purchased the ranch, and he didn't buy it for the cattle. He bought it for the data. Bigelow established the National Institute of Discovery Science. He brought in PhDs and former Intel officers, elite security teams, and together they turned the ranch into a living laboratory. Through Bigelow, the secrets of the Uintah Basin were funneled directly back into a highly classified Pentagon program known as AAWSAP. But because Bigelow's company was a private entity, the data gathered there never had to be shared with Congress. The government essentially outsourced the investigation of the impossible to a friend with a private checkbook. The night trains Terry Sherman saw weren't just moving hardware. They were moving the future of human physics into a private boardroom. But if the source material is in the corporate hands, I hear you asking, where are they testing it? If you want to study high-strangeness or test a craft that breaks the laws of physics, you don't want to do it in the clear, crowded skies of Nevada. You go to the land of the giants. You go to Dugway Proving Ground in Utah. Dugway is a restricted military zone roughly the size of the state of Rhode Island. It completely dwarfs Area 51, and for decades the public has been told that Dugway is just a boring, dusty range for testing chemical weapons. But look at the witness logs from the perimeter. Security personnel at Dugway have reported red orbs, not flares, not drones, but intelligent basketball-sized spheres of light that bleed out of the Uintah Basin and hover over the chemical bunkers. These objects don't show up on conventional radar, but they do trigger every seismic and thermal sensor on the base. This isn't coincidence of geography, it is a strategic alignment. Dugway is sitting directly adjacent to the exact same anomalous hotbed that houses the legendary Skinwalker Ranch. Consider the possibility that Dugway isn't just a testing ground. It is a massive militarized containment and observation zone for interdimensional phenomena. Personnel have described silent lightning and shimmering tears in the desert air, visual distortions that look like heat haze but happen in the dead of winter. The military isn't just building a better drone here, they are monitoring a breach. By locking down thousands of square miles under the guise of toxic gas testing, they have indeed created a private laboratory for the impossible. A few miles away, the civilians are seeing portals in the dirt, yet the sensors at Dugway are tracking the energy signatures of those portals with military-grade precision. They are sitting on the edge of a hot zone, watching something they cannot control, waiting for it to blink, and if you want to see the real front line, stop looking at the hangars in Groom Lake. Start looking at the electronic fences in the Utah desert. It's episodes like this one that are going to get me in trouble. They don't want you to know this, but Area 51 has successfully focused the world's attention on the sky. But the most brilliant part of the deception isn't the technology, it's the audience. Area 51 has successfully focused the world's attention on the sky. But the most brilliant part of the deception isn't the technology, it's the audience. We have to talk about the gatecrashers. For years, we've watched YouTubers and amateur researchers post videos claiming they fooled the security. They used long-range lenses from the top of Tikaboo Peak, or they filmed themselves sneaking up to the warning signs claiming, "We outsmarted the Cammo Dudes and their white raptors." They think they are the hunters. They think they are catching a glimpse of the forbidden. But if you understand MILDEC, you realize the truth is much darker. These creators, they are the unwitting participants in a live-fire psychological operation. The Pentagon doesn't actually leave next-generation drones sitting on a taxiway when they know there is a high-resolution lens pointed at it from a public ridgeline. They want those blurry photos on the internet. They want the speculation. Every leaked sighting by a viral influencer is a data point the military use to gauge public perception and to keep the alien mythos alive. You aren't watching a secret. You are watching a beautifully scripted performance designed to keep you pinned in a patch of dirt that hasn't held a real secret in 30 years. And this brings us to the final part. It's known as the Prestige. Area 51 exists as a permanent museum of the known secret, so that you never look for the unknown truth. While you were watching the gatecrashers playing cat and mouse with private contractors, the real assets were being funneled into a breakaway civilization. For 80 years, a select group of private interests have operated with zero oversight, utilizing trillions of dollars of your money in untraceable black budgets. They haven't just been reverse engineering debris, they have been building a parallel technology reality. They didn't just move the assets out the back door, they moved the entire future of the human race into a corporate vault and locked the door from the inside. They don't need Groom Lake anymore. They own the law, and they own the narrative. The aliens are the perfect cover story for the human-led coup of a global technology order. The magic trick is over. The handkerchief has been put away, the watch is gone, and the scariest part is, you are still clapping for the magician. Thanks for joining me here today, and remember, they do rely on you forgetting, on you clicking away. Don't do it. Go deeper down the rabbit hole with this next video. And to make sure the signal can find you again, join the network, click subscribe here, and keep the light alive. This is Thinkavarium.